Sitting in the New York airport wasn't exactly Max's idea of a pleasant evening. As he watched passengers board what he hoped would be his flight back to Charlotte, he thought about how the last few days had unfolded. Max, along with his two sisters, owned a small pharmaceutical company their father had started decades ago. Their father had developed a few valuable, though rarely used, drugs that kept the business profitable, but it was never a company destined for significant growth. Both of his parents had passed away, and Max had spent the past few days in New York negotiating the sale of the business to a larger pharmaceutical corporation. The deal had officially closed that day, with the lawyers handling the final paperwork. Max really hoped he'd make it home tonight, but things weren't looking great. The last flight of the day to Charlotte was fully booked, and he was third on the standby list. He hadn't bothered calling his wife, Camilla, because he didn't know what to tell her yet. Sitting at the airport bar, sipping his second gin and tonic, Max thought about the sale and the $10 million he and his sisters would split. For him, this meant a sizable payout and a well-paid transition period working for the larger company. Life for him and Camilla was about to change. Their twin daughters were already almost out of the house, both juniors at Duke University, where the tuition bills were overwhelming. But with this new money, everything would be easier once the deal was fully settled. The boarding process was wrapping up, and Max watched as the last passengers were ushered onto the plane. Then, something unexpected happened. The screen updated, and his name appeared on the waitlist. Max quickly threw some cash on the bar, waved to the bartender, who gave him a thumbs up, grabbed his briefcase and duffel, and dashed toward the gate. The agent handed him his boarding pass and explained that a group of 4 people who had checked in remotely hadn't shown up, so Max and a couple of others got their seats. He rushed onto the plane, and to his surprise, he had a first-class seat. That felt like a good sign. As the boarding door closed behind him and the plane started to taxi, a flight attendant offered him a drink. Max felt like he had earned another gin and tonic, so he accepted and soon drifted off to sleep, dreaming of a future where he and Camilla would always be flying first class, thanks to the pharmaceutical deal. The jolt of the plane landing woke him up. He made his way through the terminal to the taxi stand, still groggy. He'd driven his pickup truck to the airport a few days earlier, but now he was too tired and a little tipsy to drive. It was late, too late to call Camilla to pick him up, so he settled into the cab for the long ride home, drifting off again. The driver had to shake him awake when they finally arrived. Max paid, tipped generously, and sluggishly climbed out of the taxi. It had been a long, draining day, and all he could think about was collapsing into bed with Camilla. But as the taxi pulled away and Max turned toward the house, he froze. Parked in the driveway, right in front of his side of the garage, was a gold Mercedes. It wasn't just any Mercedes, it looked sleek and expensive, much more luxurious than anything he'd seen around their neighborhood. The house was completely dark, and it was well past midnight. Max stood there, staring at the car, his mind racing. He'd spoken to Camilla earlier that day, and she hadn't mentioned anyone coming by. Max tried to push away the uneasy thoughts creeping into his mind, hoping there was some innocent explanation. Still, he couldn't stop imagining the worst. Slowly, he made his way through the side door, into the silent house, and up the stairs toward the bedroom he shared with Camilla. The door was slightly ajar. Max stepped inside, and what he saw hit him like a punch to the gut. Camilla lay there, naked, with her arm draped over another man, who was also fast asleep, a slight smile on his face. Max's world stopped. His brain froze. He couldn't breathe. For a moment, it felt like his heart had stopped beating too. He stood there, unable to move, staring at the scene he never thought he'd see. It felt like forever, but eventually, his mind started functioning again. He glanced at Camilla's hand resting on the man, both of them snoring softly. This sight shattered Max's heart. Up until tonight, he had loved listening to Camilla snore. She snored gently, almost like a soft purr, and Max had always thought it meant she felt completely safe, wrapped in the peaceful sleep that came from sharing a bed and life with him. That soothing sound used to lull him to sleep, but now he knew he'd never hear it again. He'd never sleep next to her again. Even through the heartbreak, Max's thoughts began to clear. He noticed the man's clothes, neatly folded on the chair Max himself had sat in countless times. A burning anger started to swell inside him. Max quickly pulled on his pants, grabbed his wallet and car keys, but paused for a moment. He considered getting the tennis racket from the bedroom closet and beating the guy with it. Maybe even hitting Camilla too. But both of those options, while satisfying in the moment, would likely cause him major trouble in the future. A different plan started forming in his mind. He took out his phone and snapped some incriminating photos. As his idea took shape, Max finished taking pictures, then gathered up all of the guy's clothes and shoes. The man was big. Max stood 5 feet 10 inches and weighed about 160 pounds, but this guy had to be at least 4 or 5 inches taller and maybe 50 pounds heavier. In hindsight, the tennis racket might not have been a smart idea, even for a short-term fix. Holding the man's clothes and shoes in his hands, Max took one last look at his wife, his beloved Camilla, the mother of his precious daughters, and hardened his heart against the love that had sustained him for over 20 years. He left the bedroom, still tearless, and headed down the stairs to the front door. The car key fob beeped, unlocking the Mercedes. Max placed his briefcase and duffel bag inside, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. He'd never been one for luxury cars, but once he sat inside, he realized he liked it. Figuring out the controls, he shifted the car into gear and drove off. After about a mile, Max pulled over to check out the guy's wallet. Inside, he found the usual things: some cash, business cards identifying the guy as Franklin Thompson, a senior sales manager at a local Mercedes dealership, and a driver's license with a Charlotte address. If this Franklin guy had a family, Max realized he could make life pretty difficult for him, and maybe even for Camilla, too. But right now, Max was exhausted. He just needed to find a motel and get some sleep. Meanwhile, Camilla was typically a cautious woman. She knew she wasn't as smart as her husband Max, but her carefulness had allowed her affair with Franklin Thompson to last nearly 5 months without Max suspecting a thing. As she lay in bed with Franklin the next morning, she thought Max was still in New York. Franklin was good in bed, maybe not as good as Max, but outside of the bedroom, he couldn't compare. He was just too much of a car salesman, she mused. She'd come to the decision that it was time to end the affair. Franklin was getting too clingy, wanting to spend the night more often. She'd allowed it this time, but it would be the last. She intended to spend the rest of her life with Max, and letting a stranger into their marital bed, whether Max ever found out or not, was too disrespectful. She planned to call Franklin later that day and gently but firmly end things. As she headed to the shower, Franklin returned to the bedroom, wrapped in a towel. He stood there for a moment before asking, "Camilla, where are my clothes?" "What? I didn't touch them. They should be right where you left them. I folded them up, right here on this chair, but they're gone." "Did you take them to the guest room?" "They must be somewhere," Camilla said, growing a bit impatient. "Maybe they'd both had too much to drink the night before." "No, I'm sure I didn't, but I'll check downstairs," Franklin replied, heading out of the room. A moment later, he rushed back up the stairs, panicked. "Camilla, my car, it's gone. My clothes aren't downstairs. Someone must have come in last night, took my clothes, and stole my car. Damn it, what the hell is going on?" Franklin was trying to process what had happened. "I'm sorry, what?" Camilla was struggling to understand. How could his clothes and car have gone missing? They had both been in the house all night. Could someone have broken in? Suddenly, Camilla collapsed onto the bed, leaving Franklin confused. "What? What's wrong?" Camilla, gasping for air and trying to collect her thoughts, finally managed to say, "Franklin, what if it was Max? What if he came back from New York while we were asleep? What if he took your things? And your car?" Franklin sank onto the bed beside her, wide-eyed. Oh, crap. You need to find out where he is. If it's him, then we've got bigger problems. But if he's still in New York, that means someone else broke in, and we need to call the police. I need my stuff back. Especially the car. Damn it. And if we do call the cops, they'll ask about that car. It's registered in my wife's name for some tax reason. His voice trailed off as he envisioned a future full of complications, potentially worse than just losing his clothes and car. I'll call his office, Camilla said, grabbing her phone. His secretary usually gets in early. She should know where he is. She dialed the number, her heart racing. After a few rings, a familiar voice answered. Max Trunk's office, how can I help you? Said Sheila, the secretary. Hey, Sheila, it's Camilla. I know it's early, but I haven't heard from Max since yesterday. Do you know where he is? He didn't call last night, and I'm a little worried. Hi, Camilla. Oh, don't worry, it's still early. The New York team worked late yesterday, and they're probably starting a bit later today. Max mentioned yesterday, around 6, that they were making great progress on the deal. I'm sure he's still in New York, and I expect to hear from him as soon as they're back in the lawyer's office. Camilla breathed a slight sigh of relief. So he's definitely still there? Yes, I'm sure of it. Would you like me to have him call you once he checks in? Please, only if he has a moment. I know this deal is important. Thank you, Sheila. After hanging up, Camilla turned to Franklin. Max is still in New York. We need to call the police and report the break-in and the car theft. Franklin looked at her, exasperated. Camilla, what are we supposed to say? That your lover had his clothes stolen from your bedroom and his car stolen from the driveway? This is a nightmare. I get it, okay. Let's think it through. How about this, I'll take you home, you get dressed, and you report the theft as if it happened there. Say your wife took the kids to school and someone stole your car while you were at home. Maybe. Just don't mention the stolen clothes. That's going to be tricky to explain. Franklin thought about it, nodding slowly. Except I told my wife yesterday that I was going to Atlanta for a meeting about the new Mercedes S-Class and wouldn't be home until noon. Okay, but maybe we can wait until noon. You drove home briefly, left your keys in the car because you were going to head right back out to the dealership, and someone stole the car while you were inside. You know, it might work. And you could say you left your wallet in the car, too, so that explains everything. Franklin sighed, starting to see the logic. Yeah. That might just work. In the meantime, we could hang out here for a while, maybe. Take another shower together? He suggested, flashing a hopeful grin. Camilla hesitated, but after a moment, she shook her head. No, Franklin. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've decided it's time to end things. We had a good run, but last night. What if it had been Max? We were lucky it wasn't. Let's get dressed and go grab some breakfast instead. Franklin stared at her for a moment, considering arguing, but deep down, he knew she was right. They were pushing their luck, and it was time to stop. Yeah, you're right. It was fun while it lasted. He smiled to himself, thinking about the flirty mom who frequently visited the car dealership. Okay, so. Let's find me some clothes, Franklin said. It wasn't as easy as they thought. Franklin was about 50 pounds heavier and 4 inches taller than Max. Eventually, Camilla found an old pair of sweatpants that would fit him after cutting a few slits at the waist. She tied a makeshift belt to keep them up, and dug out a sweatshirt that had turned pink in the wash. It wasn't ideal, but it would do for now. She had hastily tossed the clothes into the washing machine, then trimmed the sleeves and cut larger armholes, creating Franklin's new outfit. She almost made a comment about his clownish appearance but decided to just give a small smile when she saw the look on his face. They decided to watch some TV until it was time to head over to Franklin's house. Earlier that morning, around the time Franklin discovered his missing clothes and car, Max had pulled up to the address on Franklin's driver's license. It was a nice house, with a small bike leaning against the garage wall. Max sat in his car for a while, lost in thought, still without shedding a single tear. The night at the motel had gone by quickly, and he hadn't even gone for his usual run until dawn. He was surprised he didn't feel worse, thinking he might still be in shock. Walking up to the front door, Max pulled out Franklin's wallet and rang the bell. A young woman, probably in her 20s, attractive but a bit frazzled, opened the door. Max, dressed in a suit he'd bought the day before in New York, stood there looking a little rumpled with no tie. He didn't look his best, but hoped he didn't seem threatening. He held up Franklin's driver's license so she could see it, then pointed at the gold Mercedes parked in the driveway. Before he could say a word, the woman slammed the door in his face. A few seconds later, she reopened it, this time holding her cell phone. "I have 911 ready to dial. You better tell me my husband is okay," she demanded. "Ma'am, I have a picture on my phone of your husband and my wife, naked, in bed, fast asleep together," Max replied. "To be honest, I don't think there's anything wrong with your husband, or with my wife. If you want to call 911, go ahead. I'll wait in the car." They stared at each other for a moment before her expression softened. She opened the door and let him in. As she started to say something, they both heard a child's voice from the kitchen. "Wait here, I'll be right back," she said, turning to go where the voices were coming from. Max could hear her talking, presumably to one of her children. A few minutes later, she returned and handed him a cup of coffee. "I hope you drink it black. I need to get the kids ready for school and take them there. To be honest, I trust you more than my husband right now. You can stay here until I get back, and then we can talk." "Okay, that works," Max responded. "Looks like we're in the same boat." He sat in the living room as the woman left with her two children, introducing him as Dad's friend. Max took a sip of the coffee. It wasn't great, but instead of calling his office, he just sat there, lost in thought. When the woman returned, she hurried upstairs, and came back down a few minutes later looking more put together, her hair brushed and lips lightly tinted. She extended her hand, and as they shook hands, she introduced herself. "I'm sorry for all the craziness earlier. I'm Molly Thompson, still married to Franklin Thompson, who is currently involved with the woman you are still married to." Max couldn't help but chuckle at her phrasing. It felt good to laugh. "You're absolutely right about all the current events," he said. "I'm Max Tronder, and my wife's current name is Camilla Tronder." Max then explained what had happened the previous night. As he talked, he noticed tears welling up in Molly's eyes. "I'm going to divorce Camilla, and those photos I took will definitely help me get a decent settlement. I can send them to your phone if you think you'll need them." "Yeah, I probably should have them," Molly replied, her expression blank. Max reached for his phone but stopped when she said, "Wait, don't send them to me. If I see them, I'll never be able to get those images out of my head. You keep them, and if I need them, I'll call you." "Of course," Max said. Then he added, "I probably won't be at my current job for much longer, and I definitely won't be living in my current house. I'll give you my lawyer's contact information. You can reach out to him if you ever need the photos or help with a divorce." "Thank you," Molly said. "But what should we do right now? Are you going to return the car? Or wait for Franklin and try to fight him? He's a big guy, you know. He's put on a little weight, but he's still pretty big. He was supposed to be in Atlanta yesterday for a work meeting and stay there overnight, but he should be home this afternoon. You know, I kind of like this car," Max said, grinning. "I've never driven a Mercedes before, and I think I'll keep it until someone forces me to return it. And I have to say, I don't think I can refer to your husband by his actual name anymore. To me, he's just the jerk." Molly laughed, and Max joined in. They both needed the release after everything they'd been through. "Well, actually, the car is registered under my," Molly said, "for some tax reason, I think it's more depreciation. Or, should I say, Franklin put it in my name since I drive more than he does. She paused thoughtfully, then added, you know, since the car is registered under my name, I can technically give you permission to drive it. If you get pulled over, the cops can call me, and I'll confirm everything. Max liked the idea but stayed quiet, letting Molly continue to map out her plan. Oh, and one more thing, she added. There have been a lot of break-ins around here lately. You've got Franklin's keys and clothes. If the spare key we hide in the backyard is gone when he shows up, he might try to break in, and if the alarm's set to instant alert mode, he'll definitely get the police's attention. Max laughed. Molly, I think I'm falling for you all over again. You're brilliant. Okay, she replied, rushing him off. Calm down. Franklin can wait until the kids and I are back from school this afternoon. I'll pick them up and maybe head to the park for a bit. That'll give him more time to get into whatever mess he's bound to. Whatever happens, just keep me posted, especially if he gets into trouble with the cops. And call me if you need the car back. I don't want you stuck in a bad spot. Now, we both need to get out of here. Max drove off in the sleek, gold Mercedes, thinking how much he'd like the same model but in a better color. Molly handed him a written permission slip just in case, and he assumed she'd retrieve the hidden key, set the alarm, and leave for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, Camilla and Franklin arrived at his house around noon. Camilla quickly dropped him off and sped away, clearly eager to avoid any more drama. Franklin walked up to his front door, hoping it might be unlocked, but also dreading the possibility that Molly might still be home. Of course, the door was locked. He hurried around the house to the backyard, where they kept the spare key hidden under a rock. But the rock was gone. Oh, crap, he muttered, staring at the house. He debated whether he should break in. He tried the back door, locked too. He realized he had no other choice but to force his way inside. He scanned the windows along the back of the house, deciding which one would be the easiest to break. He stopped in front of the family room window. It was the largest, giving him enough space to climb through once it was broken. Franklin broke a branch off a nearby tree, glancing nervously at the glass. He needed to be careful, especially since he was barefoot. He grabbed 2 chairs from the porch and placed them near the window, thinking he could use them to climb over the broken glass. Taking a deep breath, Franklin hurled the branch through the window. The glass shattered with a loud, satisfying crack. But immediately, the blaring siren of the home alarm system went off. And as bad luck would have it, a police car was cruising down the street at that exact moment. Molly had, after all, called the local station earlier that day to report concerns about the recent break-ins. Damn it, Franklin muttered under his breath as he scrambled to climb through the broken window and shut off the alarm. But he wasn't fast enough. Police. Stop right there. Step away from the house and put your hands up. Franklin turned around to see 2 officers, guns drawn. He did as they commanded, climbing off the chairs and raising his hands, though he slightly cut his leg in the process. Officers, I can explain, he began, but one of the policemen quickly cuffed him, ignoring his explanation. The officer started reading him his rights while Franklin stammered, "This is my house. I lost my key, so I had to break in to get some clothes and make a call." The cops glanced at his tracksuit, looking at him like he was wearing some sort of clown outfit. One of them asked, "Do you have any ID on you?" No. Not right now. You see, I lost my car, and all my clothes and stuff were in it. I just need to get inside to change." "How exactly did you lose your car, sir?" He had stayed over at a friend's place, and this morning, his car was just gone. It wasn't there. Just gone. "Did you file a missing car report?" one officer asked. "Maybe you left it at a bar or something?" Franklin was at a loss. He didn't want to explain where he had been or why he hadn't reported the car missing, but he also didn't want to end up in jail for attempting to break into his own home. Plus, the handcuffs were starting to hurt. Then, he thought of a solution that might work. "You can call my wife," Franklin said, "she can identify me, and maybe you could take me to my office. I can ask someone there for some help, maybe get some clothes." It wasn't a great plan, but it was better than going to jail. One of the officers took down Molly's phone number from Franklin and went to make the call. Franklin could hear the officer's side of the conversation. "Ma'am, this is Officer Riley with the Charlotte Police Department. We're at the address, and we have a man here claiming to be your husband. He tried to break into your house because, according to him, he lost his clothes." "Yes, ma'am." "Uh-huh. Yes, ma'am, of course. Thank you." The officer turned back to Franklin, smirking. "Your wife says her husband is in Atlanta and that anyone breaking into her home must be a burglar. She's hoping we lock you up and throw away the key." "But," Franklin stammered, close to tears, as the cops led him to the patrol car, ready to take him to the station. Meanwhile, Camilla arrived at her office half a day late, determined to make up for lost time. She was still thinking about Max, wondering why she hadn't heard from him. She called his cell, but there was no answer. So, she tried his office. "Sheila, it's Camilla again. I'm starting to get worried about Max. I haven't heard anything from him. Have you?" "No, nothing new. I think he's still in New York with the lawyers, but it's odd that he hasn't called. You sound worried. I'll give them a call and see what I can find out. Either he or I will call you back in a few minutes." "Thanks, Sheila. You're the best secretary ever." A few minutes later, Camilla's phone rang. It was Sheila. "Camilla, I just spoke with the law office. Max left yesterday evening, hoping to catch the last flight back to Charlotte. I called his cell, and I did get a hold of him. He asked me to let you know that he'll call later." "Thanks, Sheila." "I appreciate it," Camilla replied, hanging up. But a sinking feeling began to form in the pit of her stomach. Max had hung up with Sheila and was now driving a gold Mercedes on his way to meet a divorce lawyer, recommended by Fred Thomas, his longtime business attorney. Max trusted Fred, and he hoped this divorce lawyer would be just as reliable. "Mr. Tronder, please have a seat. Ms. Reinhardt will be with you shortly," the receptionist said as Max walked into the office. The space was modest, no expensive furniture, but it didn't look cheap either. Max felt slightly reassured. Before he could overthink things, a woman, about 50 years old with dyed red hair and a friendly demeanor, entered the room. "Mr. Tronder?" she asked. Max stood up, nodding. "Yes. I'm Anna Reinhardt," she said, smiling. "Fred called and asked me to take good care of you. Let's go into my office and discuss your situation." Max followed her into the office, which was comfortable but not extravagant. He accepted a cup of coffee from the secretary and began explaining his story. He told her about catching his wife cheating, wanting a divorce, and his concern for protecting his assets, especially the proceeds from the sale of his company and his sister's company. He decided to leave out the part about the gold Mercedes for now, even though he suspected Anna would find it amusing. "Max, is it okay if I call you that?" she asked. He nodded, and she continued. "Well, I have some good news, relatively speaking, of course, given the situation. Fred told me that you and your sister owned your company before you got married, so the shares are considered separate property. That means your wife has no legal claim to those shares or the proceeds from the sale. However, you need to make sure that the shares and any proceeds stay in a separate account, not a joint one you share with your wife. Is that right?" "Yes, I think so," Max replied. "But what about the house, our retirement accounts, and things like that?" "That's where the news isn't so great," Anna said. "Since your income is significantly higher than hers, you'll likely have to pay some form of spousal support for a while. But we can work to avoid tapping into your retirement accounts by negotiating a larger alimony payment upfront. It's not ideal, but it's better than splitting retirement funds decades down the road. And, Since your kids are in college, there's no child support to worry about. Max sighed, absorbing everything. I see. Let's do what we can to protect my future, even if it's a little painful in the short term. Are you okay with taking on the rest of the college expenses for your daughters? The lawyer asked. Yes, that's fine, Max replied. What about the house? You and your wife will need to decide what you want to do with it. You could sell and split the proceeds, or one of you could buy out the other based on the current appraised value. Max sighed. After what I saw last night, I definitely don't want the house. And I doubt Camilla can afford to buy my half, so I guess selling it is the best option. Okay. I can prepare the paperwork for that. The divorce petition is pretty standard, so I can have it ready by tomorrow morning, if you'd like. We could serve her the papers by the afternoon, and a proposed settlement could follow next week. Wow, that's fast, Max said, his voice faltering. Max, listen, the lawyer continued. If there's even a small chance you and your wife can work this out, maybe through counseling or giving it some time. No, Max interrupted. No, it's not that. It's just shocking, you know. Less than 24 hours ago, I was happy. I couldn't wait to get home and tell her about selling the company. And now here I am, talking about filing for divorce. But we have to move forward. I'll handle it. Of course, she replied. But if you change your mind, just let me know. We can work things out. Max nodded, thanked her, paid the retainer, and left the office. As he walked to the gold Mercedes, his thoughts returned to what he had seen the night before. The memory stung, but it also reminded him that he needed to call Camilla, as he had promised his secretary. When he dialed, Camilla answered from her office at the law firm where she worked. Camilla, it's Max. You called earlier? Max, she exclaimed. Thanks for calling. I missed you. Where are you? I'm in Charlotte. When did you get back? She asked, her heart sinking. Last night. A cold dread washed over Camilla, making it hard for her to breathe. She leaned back in her chair, trying to find words, but nothing came out. I'm hanging up now, Max said, his tone firm. No, Max, please. She managed to say, her voice breaking. Please, can we meet somewhere? I just need to see you. Even if it's only for a few minutes. Max hesitated. This was the woman he had loved for over 20 years, the mother of his children, his partner and everything. Okay, Camilla. How about the Center Cafe at 6? Camilla's heart clenched. The Center Cafe was where they had first met, where they had shared so many memories. She was terrified by what Max might say but couldn't refuse. Okay, Max. I'll see you there. And Max. I'm sorry. I love you. Max hung up, and Camilla sat there, tears streaming down her face, her guilt overwhelming her. Camilla arrived at the cafe early and ordered a glass of wine. As she sat there, waiting, memories of her past flooded her mind. She thought of the person she had become, of the mistakes she had made. She remembered her wild college days, her first real sexual experiences with football players who made her feel powerless. When she met Max, she thought she had left those desires behind. He was everything she needed, strong, loving, a great father, and a good provider. It should have been enough. But then there was that flight home from the West Coast, after spending the weekend with Max before his business meetings. She had flown back alone, and that's when she met the man who would change everything, a coach for a local NFL team. They drank too much, and Camilla fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. She woke up to find his hand between her legs, under her skirt. She should have screamed or pushed him away, but she didn't. And she didn't feel guilt afterward, only relief that Max didn't return home until later that week, giving her time to recover. The affair didn't end there. The coach introduced her to another man, a player from the practice squad. Not a star, not even a rookie. But just as strong, and that was all it took for her to fall again. Now, sitting in the cafe, waiting for Max, she realized how deeply she had fallen into her mistakes. She feared that it was too late to make things right. As dominant as the coach was in bed, Camilla was actually relieved when she was assigned somewhere else. Over time, the guilt caught up with her. She wanted to stay faithful to Max, so she broke off the affair. By the time their daughters had gone off to college, Camilla thought her cheating days were behind her. She genuinely loved Max and enjoyed the extra time they had together when the kids were away. But temptation crept back, and when Max did something thoughtful, he told her it was time for her to get a new car, a luxury one, and let her pick. Unfortunately, she ended up at the Mercedes dealership, where she met Franklin Thompson. Franklin didn't sell her a car, but he knew exactly what to say to get her into bed. She knew it was wrong, not only because she loved Max but because Franklin wasn't even that good in bed. Camilla had gotten away with her previous affairs, believing her marriage was still solid, and now, more than ever, she wanted to remain faithful to Max. She wanted to do the right thing and stay away from making mistakes like this. Letting Franklin into their marital bed had been a terrible lapse in judgment, even if Max hadn't found out. But she had, and now she feared the consequences. "Hey, Camilla," Max said, standing in front of her. He looked older than when he left for New York, and she knew it was all her fault. The guilt was gnawing at her insides. "Hi, Max," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for coming. I don't even know where to start. I'm so sorry. Can I ask you a few questions?" Max asked, sitting down across from her. "Max, please. No. If there's any chance for us, questions and answers will only ruin that chance. Max, we should just leave, escape somewhere for a few days, a Caribbean island, maybe, where we can reconnect, where we can just hold each other." "Camilla, stop. If you can't answer my questions, I'm walking out right now," Max said sternly. The pit in her stomach twisted, but Camilla knew she had to face his questions, no matter how painful it was. Maybe, just maybe, after getting through his anger, there might be a chance for reconciliation. "Okay, Max, ask me anything. Do you know what time I got home last night?" Max's question caught her off guard. "No. Not really," she started, hesitating. She didn't know where this was going but felt the dread of his next question. "And do you know what I saw when I came home, when I walked upstairs to our bedroom, or what used to be our bedroom?" he asked coldly. Camilla's heart sank. "Yes, Max, I know what you saw. And I know it must have been one of the worst things you've ever experienced in your life. And I know it's all my fault. I'm begging you, Max, please listen to me. I'm so sorry. I won't fight you if you want a divorce. If that's what you want." "Shut up, Camilla," Max interrupted sharply. "Next question. How many men have there been since we got married? And don't lie to me. If I think you're lying, I'm walking out of here." Camilla's first instinct was to lie, but she knew that was too risky. Her second thought was that their marriage was probably over anyway. "3, she admitted quietly. "3 men, Max. Men I now deeply regret ever meeting. I can see in your eyes that this is the end of our marriage, and I get it. You deserve better than me. But I'm willing to do anything to give us another chance, if you're open to it." Max stared at her for a moment, then said, "Call your lawyer, Camilla. Tomorrow you'll be served with divorce papers." He stood up and left. Camilla sat there, too stunned to cry at first. But as Max's words replayed in her mind, the guilt hit hard, and tears began to fall. Max walked out of the cafe, remembering that this was the place where he and Camilla had first met all those years ago. He wondered if this would be the last time they ever had such an intimate conversation. Intimacy, he thought bitterly, wasn't just about physical closeness, it was also knowing the ugliest truths about someone. Hearing his wife admit to sleeping with other men, and the memory of walking in on her with that sleazy Franklin in their own bed, was something he could never unsee. How could he ever get past that? Maybe, just maybe, he could come to terms with the three faceless men over the 20 years they had been together. Maybe, with counseling and a lot of humility on her part, they could try to rebuild something. But that scene in their bed. That was unforgivable. Their marriage was over. Sitting in the damn gold Mercedes, Max finally let the tears come. At some point, Max noticed the sun setting. He wiped his eyes and started the car. Max wiped his face and thought back to what Molly Thompson had said earlier that morning, which now felt like it had happened ages ago. She had told him not to send her any pictures of her husband, Franklin, cheating with Camilla, as she believed it would be much harder to forgive him if she saw the visual proof. Max decided to give her a call, share his thoughts, and check on the situation with the car. "Hello?" Molly answered. "Molly, it's Max Tronder, from this morning. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. And also ask about what you'd like me to do with the car." "Max, thanks for calling. I'm hanging in there. You can hold on to the car for now. Franklin's in a lot of trouble, so he won't be needing it for a while." "Trouble? Please tell me you didn't shoot him," Max joked. "No, but he might have preferred that," Molly said dryly. "He got arrested for trying to break into our house. Apparently, he took a swing at one of the cops. Franklin's a big guy, so they hit him with a stun gun. And something happened while he was in jail. He won't talk about it, but I think he might have been attacked by another inmate. He wouldn't call me for help, so he had to reach out to his brother for bail. Now his entire family knows everything." "Wow, Molly," Max said, surprised. "I can't say I feel bad for him, but I do feel bad for you. I just want to say that you made the right call this morning by choosing not to see those pictures of him cheating. If you're even considering reconciliation, those photos would only make things harder." "Yeah," Molly replied. "He finally came home a few hours ago, crying and apologizing, begging me to let him stay for the time being. We've got 2 little kids, so I'm trying to figure things out. But life won't be easy for him from here on out. His own brother, who's a lawyer, told me I should make Franklin sign a postnuptial agreement, and he offered to help with that. On top of that, I'm going to manage all the finances for a while. Franklin's going to be on a very short leash, and I'm not afraid to yank it when needed." "Keep it up, Molly," Max encouraged. "I'm rooting for you. And whenever you need to return the car, just let me know." They hung up, and Max sat there, feeling a pang of jealousy toward Molly. Maybe Franklin had learned his lesson after being arrested, charged with assaulting a cop, and whatever had happened in jail. Max hoped so, for the sake of Molly and their children. Afterward, Max drove back to his motel, where he had one more task before trying to get some sleep, calling his daughters, Jane and Joan. "Hi, Daddy." It sounded like Jane had answered. The twins weren't identical, but they might as well have been. They sounded the same, and they attended the same expensive college, both studying nursing. At least they didn't look exactly alike, similar, clearly sisters, but not identical. Max often admitted to himself that he was glad for that. The two of them were already pros at ganging up on him, and he imagined it would be worse if they were identical, demanding cars, money for trips to Florida, or asking for favors. "Daddy, please." They were always persuasive. Yet, as much as he pretended to be tough, Max secretly enjoyed spoiling them. "Janie?" Max said. "Yeah, you guessed right," she laughed. "Not too hard though, you had a 50-50 shot. Listen," Max began, "tomorrow's Saturday, and I'd love to take you and your sister out for brunch. How does 11 a.m. at that bistro on 4th Street sound? You know, the one we used to go to." "Sure, that sounds good," Jane replied. Max could hear some noise on her end before she came back on the line. "Joan's up for it, too. Can we?" Max quickly interrupted, remembering that last time they had brought along 6 or 7 friends. "Let's keep it just the 3 of us this time," Okay? Of course, Dad, Jane agreed. But... And before you ask, Max cut her off again, not wanting to get into a conversation over the phone. I need to run. I'll see you both at 11. Love you. Tell your sister I love her, too. Bye. Max hung up, hoping Jane wouldn't immediately call Camilla to tell her. He couldn't stop her from calling, though he knew that the more he tried to stop her, the more likely she'd do just that. Tomorrow morning would come soon enough. Meanwhile, Camilla was still sitting in the cafe, reeling from Max's parting words. Whether they were a warning or a curse, she wasn't sure. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to stop herself from sobbing. She had messed everything up, her marriage, her family, her entire life. Soon her daughters would know. Her parents would know. Everyone would know. She would likely lose Max and her home, and that thought crushed her. Poor Max, she thought. How could I have hurt him like this? In their bed, naked, probably with that damn Franklin who had a hard-on, this scene must have nearly shattered Max. Camilla's tears kept flowing. Finally, the waitress approached and asked if Camilla needed to use the restroom. Camilla choked back her sobs and managed to decline. She paid the bill and left, heading to the house that would soon no longer be hers. Once there, she found some gin, just enough to blur her thoughts, not enough to knock her out. She hoped it would help her figure out a way to win Max back. After finishing the bottle, it helped her fall asleep, hoping for some miracle to bring Max back to her. The next morning, Max sat in the breakfast nook at 11 o'clock, waiting for his daughters. He had reviewed and approved the draft of the divorce petition early that day and had driven 2 hours from Charlotte, using that time to plan how to break the news to Jane and Joan. The usual routine unfolded: hugs, kisses, questions about school and work, food ordered and eaten, dishes cleared, before the real conversation began. "Dad, we know something's wrong," Joan said. "You look a little sick. Are you here to tell us you have cancer or something? And where's Mom?" "Yes, girls, I have really bad news, but it's not about anyone's health. No one's going to die. It's Mom, isn't it?" Jane interrupted. "Did she do something terrible? Oh my God, did she run off with one of her firm's lawyers? A young, strong guy?" Both girls laughed at the absurdity of the idea, but their father's serious expression stopped them. "Dad, no. Not Mom," Joan said, unable to voice her fear. "Listen to me carefully," Max said. "Yes, Mom has changed. She cheated on me, but that doesn't mean she cheated on you girls." "That's right, Daddy," Joan said through her tears. "If her cheating is tearing apart our family, then yes, she cheated on us just as much as she cheated on you." The girls cried, and soon Max joined them. They stood up, hugging their dad and each other. "Dad, let's get out of here," Jane said. "There's a park about 2 blocks away where we can talk more privately." People were starting to stare, so Max quickly paid the bill, and they walked to the park, each of them leaning on the others for support. Once they found a bench, Jane said, "Tell us, Dad. We deserve to know how bad it really is. We can handle it." Max took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about how to explain this to you. Yes, you're adults, and you can handle this. Your mother cheated on all of us. I found her in our bed with another man, and she later admitted there were others before him. I'm still in shock, but I know she and I can't recover from this. I've already talked to a divorce lawyer, and she'll be served with divorce papers today." More tears followed, and then silence as they all processed the news and considered their future. "Girls," Max said finally, "no matter how tough things get, you need to focus on your studies. I'll make sure there's enough money to cover your senior year at Duke, and if either of you wants to pursue graduate work, I'll try to find funds for that too. But there's a condition." They looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Jane asked. "I'm happy to support your education, but I expect you to work hard and get good grades. Yes, what your mother did makes it hard to focus, but you're adults, and real adults, mature and disciplined people, can handle adversity, right? They looked at each other, cried again, and hugged him. Yes, Daddy, we will absolutely not let you down, Joan said. We're not going to fail you. Jane, looking thoughtful, added, Dad, Joan is right. We won't let you down, but what about you? Will you be okay? What are you going to do? Max sighed. You can think about a lot in a 2-hour drive. I've realized that what Mom did really hit me hard. I could crawl into a hole, feel sorry for myself, or try to make peace with your mom, but I know that's not my way. I've spent my whole adult life taking care of others, and now I need to figure out how to take care of myself. When I started working for my grandparents' company, I took care of them. After they were gone, I managed my sister's shares in the company, then I looked after my mom, and now I'm taking care of you girls. It might sound like I'm complaining, but I'm really not. The company will be sold soon, which will ease my responsibilities regarding my sisters and Camilla. I promise I'll be happy to help you start your adult lives. Out of the 3 major women in my life, I'd say 2 home runs isn't bad. That leaves me, and you know what? I see this whole story of betrayal and divorce not as the worst thing but as a chance to start anew, a life dedicated to taking care of just one person, me. Fine, Dad. If you really mean what you say, that's great, Joan said. Jane, however, was a bit more skeptical. Dad, what does this new life really mean? Are you working for another pharmaceutical company? Are you buying a farm? Good questions, and I actually have a good answer. No details yet, but this new life will be physical. I'm going to run marathons, climb mountains, swim across the Atlantic, trek through the Alps, go on safaris. I have a million things I plan to do. And who knows, while I'm doing all this, I might meet a great woman doing the same things. And that's exciting. Damn it, Dad, this is amazing. Both girls stared at him, their mouths agape. This wasn't the father they knew. He seemed like a new, vibrant person. Did you really come up with all this while driving here from Charlotte? Jane asked. Well, yes, partly. But I didn't sleep much, and different ideas were spinning in my head. I could start drinking and feeling sorry for myself, but instead, I'm going to make the best of this situation. Trust me, I'll be fine. Max left his daughters with hugs, kisses, and tears, then headed back to Charlotte in the golden Mercedes. As soon as he left, the girls called their mother. Hello? A tired voice answered. Mom, it's Joan and Jane. We just had breakfast with Dad, and he gave us some bad news, Joan said, putting the phone on speaker. What did he say? Their mother asked. Well, divorce was the big word, and it was because of your betrayal. Dad gave us some details, but that's basically it. Is this true? Oh girls, this is tough. Your father and I have been married for a long time, and this was a mistake. Actually, more than one mistake. But I believe we can get through this. I just need to give your father some time. Mom, Dad mentioned divorce. He didn't talk about fixing things. He was talking about cheating, Joan interrupted. Yes, technically he's right, but that doesn't mean it's beyond repair. I told him I'd do anything, their mother said. I think you're delusional, Jane cut in. He told us he's already met with a divorce lawyer. He said there's no turning back for you two. Joan and I don't want to take sides, but you need to face reality. There was a long, tortured silence on the other end of the line. Joan and Jane exchanged worried glances. Should they go to Charlotte? Finally, Camilla spoke, barely above a whisper. I know I messed up and ruined my marriage. I think your father hates me, and he's right. I've done awful things. He told me to hire a lawyer, and he was right about that too. I'm sorry, girls. I know it's terrible for you as well. Mom, don't worry about us, Joan said. Everything will be fine with us. Dad is doing everything he can. You need to focus on yourself. Hiring a lawyer sounds like a good start. Jane and I can come to Charlotte if you need us. Thank you, girls. That's really kind. I'll be okay. I just need some time to come to terms with what I've done. They hung up. The girls were left unsure about what to do. You know, Joan said, it's kind of funny, though not really, that we're more worried about Mom, who caused this mess, than about Dad. They talked a bit more and decided not to go home, opting instead to let their parents handle their issues without their interference. Camilla sat at home in Charlotte, feeling a bit hungover from the gin she drank the night before and more than a little depressed after talking to her daughters. She knew she needed to get up, get dressed, and do something, maybe even buy some more gin. Just then, the doorbell rang. Camilla opened the door to find a young woman stood at the door, chewing gum. Can I help you? Camilla asked. Yes, ma'am. Are you Camilla Tronder, Max Tronder's wife? Yes, that's me. Why do you ask? You've been served, the woman said, handing Camilla a folder with documents and taking some photos. What? Camilla asked, as the woman walked back to her car. Camilla went inside and sat down at the kitchen table to examine the folder. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw the title of the first document, a petition for divorce. She recalled Max's last words to her, "Get a lawyer." As she looked around the kitchen, a place filled with memories of happier times with Max, she knew those days were gone forever. She had ruined everything with her betrayal. Years later, sitting in the ballroom of an upscale hotel and watching Jane dance with her new husband, Camilla found herself lost in the past. She remembered when the girls were teenagers, and life felt overwhelming with too many activities, teenage drama, and Max being too busy with work. Back then, she thought life was tough, but now she missed it dearly. She was still working at the same law firm, doing the same monotonous paperwork. "Camilla, here's your wine," Carl said, handing her a glass. Camilla looked at him, the sweet, middle-aged lawyer who had accompanied her to Jane's wedding. "The bride looks lovely, just like her mother." "Thank you, Carl. You're very kind, and I appreciate the wine," she replied. Carl was a nice man, and she could imagine marrying him if he were interested, but he wasn't Max. She couldn't help but glance across the room at Max. He had just returned from a mountaineering trip to Nepal and looked like a bronze Greek statue, tanned, incredibly fit, and even more handsome than she remembered. He was smiling and laughing with Joan and her boyfriend, holding hands with a woman who was as beautiful and fit as Max. Joan had told her that Max had met this woman on a mountaineering trip in South America, and they had been traveling and climbing together for months. The thought of it made Camilla feel ill. "Camilla," Carl said, trying to get her attention. "I think it's time for us to leave. You've done your duty as mother of the bride, and staying here while staring at your ex-husband isn't doing you any favors. I also think it's not great for our relationship." "You're right, Carl," Camilla said. "Let me say goodbye to my daughters, and then we'll go." Camilla hugged and kissed her daughters, wished the newlyweds all the best, and, as difficult as it was, she ignored Max and his new girlfriend. Max noticed Camilla leaving and felt a pang of sadness for their past together. As he watched her, Joan asked, "Dad, remember that strange gold Mercedes you were driving when you, Jane, and I had breakfast that morning when you visited us at Duke? What happened to that car?" "Oh, Joni, that's a long story," Max replied. "Let's just say I borrowed that weird gold Mercedes from a friend and ended up giving it back. I think she sold it. It was truly an unlucky car." Max then turned to his friend to discuss their next mountain trip. "Subscribe to our channel so your second chance doesn't end up like mine," he joked. "And listen to the next story, trust me, it's even wilder than this one."